What's the biggest unsolved murder in your country? U/Akagata responded. Olof Palme, the Swedish Prime Minister at the time, was murdered in 1986. The investigation concluded in 2020 that Stig Engström was the murderer, but since he had died in 2000 he couldn't be put on trial and the investigation was cancelled. There was never any physical evidence, and most people believe that Stig was not the actual killer, but there will probably never really be a satisfying conclusion to the case. Edit, typo. U/Merry Melody Symphony responded. Apart from the weekly memes about Xavier Dupont-de-Ligons, who suspected of killing his wife and children then dropping off the face of the earth in 2011, France has one that is particularly puzzling, and I actually have a tenuous link to that one. 2012, the Annecy shootings, or Cheveline killings depending on who you're talking to. A British Iraqi family, along with a French cyclist, were murdered in the French Alps, and to this day, theories are wild and no one knows for sure what happened. Only the daughters survived. The eerie fact, my mom, at the time, was the owner of a campsite, and 2 to 3 days before the murder, the family stayed the night on our campsite. She recognized their vehicle on the news. Mom went to the police to give as much details as she could, which wasn't much, and not much they didn't already know anyways. U/deleted responded. In Kazakhstan, we had an opposition leader, who apparently committed suicide by shooting himself twice in the chest and once in the head. Edit, since you guys enjoyed this story, his name was Zamanbek Nurkadilov, you can Google more on this shady case. One of the more recent cases, maybe a couple years ago, was an KNB person, former KGB, who apparently overdosed on some synthetic drug. My friend was on the case, and he told me more details that never made it to the public. Apparently his arms were tied together behind his back and had some sort of kitchen mittens on them, so that he couldn't even use his fingers. His head was completely covered in duct tape, not even holes for nostrils, like a mummy, but with duct tape. Further investigation revealed he had HIV, that he apparently contracted less than a year prior. In that same year his first kid was born. He also owed some microfinance organization something like $10,000 that he lost gambling. That whole story is an absolute train wreck, and my friend told me they said it officials said it was OD to save the face of the KNB. Imagine how fucked up the situation was, that saying that their agent Odd was saving face. U/presence_of_me responded. In Australia it's probably the Beaumont children. See here. 3 children who went to the beach in January 1966 and disappeared. They still report on them every year. The other one is William Tyrell, a 3-year-old boy who was in foster care when he disappeared. U/cricket8509 responded. On a recent trip to Adelaide I learned about the family murders. Supposedly, the murders were committed by a group of Adelaide's upper echelon of society. The perpetrators used drugs that were only available to medical practitioners. They performed gruesome acts on young gay men. I believe one of the victims was carefully dissected into pieces, and then reassembled by rope like some bizarre human puppet. It's pretty morbid. Look, one guy took the fall and was charged for the murders. However, the majority still think the perpetrators are still out in the community, and those who know are too scared to speak up. U/Amin Jeopardy responded. El Niño Lorenzo. It's basically Puerto Rico's JonBenet Ramsey case, minus the kid being a child beauty pageant star, mixed with Casey Anthony's case. An 8-year-old kid was killed in his home. There's been a handful of suspects over the years, but no real evidence could be found against any of them. There were also a lot of fuck-ups in the investigation, including people cleaning up the crime scene before forensic investigators could study it. The boy's mom became a suspect at one point, and the media ran so hard with it that she became the most hated woman in the entire island. Everyone I talked to thought she did it. Because of this, the Secretary of Justice resigned from his post to become her personal lawyer, which is weird and sketchy. Weird. After a couple of years, the Department of Justice said she was no longer a suspect. There were other suspects after that, including a one-armed man, but no one has been officially charged yet. It's been 14 years and I don't think the case will ever be solved. U/Pitchfork Joe responded. Ireland. Sophie Tuscan Duplantier. A French socialite, minorly famous. Had a cottage in the middle of nowhere in the south of Ireland. Turned up violently bludgeoned to death one day in the 90s. Police bungled the investigation, still unsolved. There's a popular suspect, a local journalist with a history of violence towards women, who seemed frankly very unpopular in town. Not much in the way of real proof, mind you. He died a month or two ago. Either a murderer, who never faced justice, or else a falsely accused who spent decades being harassed and died without clearing his name. We will likely never know for sure. U/Gary1405 responded. Surprised I haven't seen any posts from New Zealand yet about the Bain murders. On the 20th of June, 1994, Dunedin University student David Bain returned to his family home following the morning paper run, and supposedly found his entire family dead, with his father's body holding the gun that killed his siblings and mother. He was arrested 4 days later and later found guilty. However, in 2007 he finally was acquitted after the Privy Council in London found there had been a miscarriage of justice. Nobody, to this day, knows who did it except him. U/GFDHFDGFDGSFD responded. Part Chinese. The famous Black Dahlia Chinese case. A woman had gotten into an argument with her roommate. She said she would be back soon and wanted to go for a walk. She never came back. After several days, an elderly poor Chinese woman sees a bag of what appears to be meat and thinks it's leftover meat from a store. She takes it, however, she notices an arm in the bag. It was found out it was the missing woman. She had been cut to 1,000 pieces. Some body parts were partially cooked over several days. There's a graphic photo you can see where police pieces the cut-up pieces together to make one big image of her. It's gruesome. It's been 20 years and no one found her killer. Her sister is trying to find justice for her sister, who was the first in the family to be in college. U/Collar79 responded. Oh boy. We have at least half a dozen high-profile terror attacks in the 60s to 70s. An airplane that was shot down by Redacted, during a Redacted, plenty of mafia-related murders commissioned by a top secret, various compromised people, who got suicide. And a dead pope even. Oh, and a bunch of serial killers who might or might not have existed. Or were just cover-ups for something more sinister. Namely the so-called monster of Florence and the lesser-known, but even more intriguing, monster of Bugagli. U/right_dare5812 responded. Arkankajan massacre. A guy, Vladislav Chelik, got drafted into the army and eventually displaced to serve in border guard post. That was Kazakhstan-China border post built mostly in purpose to prevent Chinese crossing the border to collect specific herbs. One day the post lost communication. It came out that the post burned and 15 people killed. All militaries were found to be dead, all except Chelik. Investigations started and a lot of versions on what exactly happened those days were discussed back then. Ultimately officials hung everything on the survived guy and gave him a life sentence, even though people questioned the possibility that a guy could kill 15 fully equipped and trained soldiers. Some say that the post used to be a point through which a large portions of good were smuggled. Smugglers were in deal with local authorities, maybe even with politicians, so they were not touched, but regular soldiers, 18 to 19 years old, could not know about that. They just followed what they believed was right to protect the border. But when they stopped smugglers, some gritty Kazakh authorities lost a ton of money, and they definitely didn't like it. U/holy_grapes responded. Spain, it is solved, but it is said that probably more people were involved. The 3 girls from Alcázar. 3 teenagers hitchhiking. A man and his brother stopped and they violated and tortured the girls to finally kill them. After a couple of months the bodies were found. It was possible to get the killers, because one left a medical bill nearby, and finally one of the 2 killers escaped and probably drowned while jumping from a ship near Ireland. It is said that politicians were involved, or maybe they were the victims of a snuff movie, things like that. U/crazy-miss-daisy-87 responded. It seems not unsolved for long, as they got a guy for another crime in the same area, and realized the connection. Emily Meng, 17, walked home from the station in a small town in Denmark in 2016. She never made it home. The police screwed up a lot, assuming she had run away due to heartbreak. They especially leaned on the fact that her messenger messages got read. However, turned out she died that same night, She was found 168 days later in a lake. She had been assaulted. No long-term suspect was found. This may not sound like a big deal, but it was for a small country like ours, which such a heinous crime torch a teenager. In 2023, a 13-year-old disappeared on her paper route. Intense police work found her 27 hours later held captive by a man and had been assaulted. He was connected to another case of a teenage girl who managed to get away. They formally charged him for Emily Meng, as well after finding a lot of evidence. Serial killers, which he may be, but he definitely intended to kill the 13-year-old, are not really normal for us, hence it is a big story. U/Director Organic 8962 replied. The 1985 murder of Yvonne Menck, the 2000 double murder of Wanda Evans and Paul Coates, the 2014 murder of Rosemary and Krauser Wurmter, and the 1990 murder of Susie Poupart are among the numerous unsolved murders in northern Wisconsin. The murder of William Clapp in 1993, the murder of Kenneth Huedes in 2006, the murder of Angelina Wall in 2001, and the 1974 murder of Mary Kathleen Schley are among the unsolved central Wisconsin murders, as are Lori DePie's disappearance in 1992, Amber Wild's disappearance in 1998, Kayla Berg's disappearance in 2009, and Ricky Jean Bryant's disappearance in 1949. The 1990 murder of Chad Mauer, the 1968 murder of Christine Rothschild, the 1980 murder of Susan LeMahieu, the 1986 murder of Andrew Namier, and the 1973 murder of Mark Just are among the unsolved murders in Madison, Wisconsin. Furthermore, the 1976 murder of Deborah Bennett, the 1978 murder of Julian Hall, the 1971 murder of Drive Thomas Speer, the 1980 murder of Shirley Stewart, and the 1979 murder of Julie Speer-Schneider, also including the 2004 disappearance of Amos Mortier, are all unsolved murders in Dane County, Wisconsin. And in Milwaukee there are hella people that get thrown in lakes and it's never solved, but can't find the biggest unsolved murder case. U/Scott Wax. There are a lot of unsolved murders in the US, but the most famous to me is the murder of Bob Crane, who was an actor, star of Hogan's Heroes. Because it happened in my hometown. A friend of his was suspected and even tried, but was acquitted. The Scottsdale police didn't have a homicide division at the time, and apparently some evidence was mishandled or lost. U/MT128 responded. Not exactly a single case, but up in Canada, especially northern BC, there is a highway known as the Highway of Tears. There have been a couple murderers caught, but given the 80+ murders, there are many cases that go unsolved. The Highway of Tears goes along Highway 16 and stretches around 719 miles. Many of the victims are often of Indigenous descent and female. Due to the long stretch, the remote location and the lack of police presence, many murders go undiscovered or unsolved. An example of this murder is the murder of Jean Sampere. Ginny Sampere went missing on the 14th of October, 1971. Her cousin Alvin was the last person to see her near a bridge on Highway 16 in Gitsigukla. He left Ginny to bike home and get his jacket. As he pedaled back to meet her, he heard a pickup door slam. But when he reached the road, there was no pickup, and his cousin was gone. There was some speculation that Ginny ran away or committed suicide after her boyfriend disappeared, but her family disputes these theories. Her boyfriend's body was found. U/Ruben HP Fu S responded. The 43 teaching college students from Ayotzinapa in Guerrero, Mexico. We all pretty much accept it was narcos plus military plus police, yet 10 years later, the army refuses to release files related to the case to the independent group of experts investigating the case. Sadly, AMLO campaigned on solving this crime, yet he is the #1 shield of the military. At the same time, he gives them ever more power in civilian life. Edit. I initially stated there was an independent prosecutor, but it's actually a panel of forensics experts, I believe both local and from other countries, that is investigating the case to avoid a conflict of interest that would arise if the government investigated. They have no prosecutorial powers as far as I'm aware. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Please like and subscribe for more videos like this one.